on the topic of thinking differently, I know when I went into practice, I was not thinking specifically about safety. And part of that was that I wasn't a leader and I was showing up and trying to remember how to treat strep throat and how to document in the medical record. But as practice leaders, we all know that in this day and age, there are things we need to think about related to practice safety. And that may range from disputes that happen with a family inside the practice for some reason. That can be a patient who may have a behavioral issue and gets activated during a visit, and you're trying to work with that patient and their family to help them relax. And frankly, some practices are thinking about ICE and what would happen if ICE showed up in your waiting room and wanted to engage with your staff or your patients. So our very first presenter this morning is the Children's National expert on these topics. We are very fortunate to have Paul Quigley, who is the Executive Director of Security, Parking, and Transportation at Children's National. In that role, Paul is responsible for identifying, implementing, and maintaining security at the hospital and at all of our community-based sites. And I can say personally, as someone who practices in the community, that Paul has really taken on that safety in those community sites in a very different way than I've ever seen, and very different from what I see at other institutions around the country. He has really focused on educational programs and strategies to help increase overall employee awareness of our own safety, as well as evidence-based strategies for de-escalation and other techniques. As his background, before coming to Children's National, Paul served as a colonel in the United States Air Force and worked in the Secretary of Defense's office. There, his responsibilities included developing physical security policies and exercises for the protection of nuclear weapons, special nuclear materials, reactors, and critical command platforms. I can tell you he brings that same level of intensity and support to protecting us as people and staff and our patients and families as he did that nuclear material. So on that, please join me in welcoming Paul Quigley.
One thing about me is I have an outrageously hard time staying behind a podium, but I'm going to take care of it today so that make sure the voice projects. I oftentimes can wander out like this. If I do that. So I'm Paul Quigley. I'm the Executive Director for Security, Parking, Transportation. Some of the other areas that we do in my department are guest services, welcome desk, language services, communications, any of those type of first line things that people see as they come into a hospital. Okay. And then, as mentioned, I did come from the Department of Defense. I've been at Children's National for almost 4 years now. It doesn't feel like that. It's gone by really quickly. But before that, 26 years, United States Air Force, retired as a colonel. And the last position I was in again was, oh, look at you're amazing. The last position that I was in was doing nuclear policy. So when you think of a person that does nuclear policy, you would think that their first landing spot wouldn't be a children's hospital, right? But
advance, go back.
Perfect. Thank you. See, the first person always gets kind of the trial things. So, okay, I'll try not to also knock this off my belt. Okay, so but the things that come to a children's hospital, it's very similar to what you'd end up seeing in the military guarding nuclear weapons. Honestly, I believe when I was I thought nuclear weapons were the nation's most critical resources. But really, the most critical resources that we have in the United States today are our children. And so what I do is I defend the nation's children. That's the way I look at this. And their families, the visitors, everybody that comes into our hospital. There's a lot of dangerous things that potentially can happen. When we look at the most victimized people in workplaces, we're seeing healthcare workers rising to the top of that. People aren't getting into fights and workplace violence happening into the Pentagon. It's not happening on our military installations. It's not happening in a lot of our industries. But what it does happen is it happens inside of hospitals. It happens inside of clinics. It happens in locations where people are most stressed. And I've talked to people at adult hospitals, and I said, you know, what do you see there? They do. They see patients that are stressed. They see family members that are concerned for their adult patients. But is there anyone more stressed than a parent with a sick child? And so with that, we have to understand a lot of different things, whether that's de-escalation techniques, whether that is understanding what we do in domestic events because parents may not agree on the care that is provided to the child. And then in the case that we have now where there's a lot of political turmoil going on when it comes to ICE, and I'm going to try to dispel any of the rumors that we've seen happening. And I really want to go into that area because I think that's one area that we haven't talked about that much to this group. And I think it's going to be helpful you to understand what your rights are and then what you need to do in case that event happens inside of your locations. Now, there is a lot of misperceptions on what actually has happened and what is going on with ICE raids and those types of activities. Now, you see in the news, you'll see people getting pulled out of cars, you'll see incidents that are happening, you'll see a lot of things that spread across the internet that are dramatized, all right, that are dramatic. And they're horrible events that are happening. All right. But what we have to do is think of our location. What would we do if this happens at our location? What are we going to do and be prepared to do? Or what are our rights within inside of that? So now, in any situation within inside of security, the answers are relatively simple, right? So the answers that we have in security, everything is relatively simple. It all comes down to just a few things that you have to know. One of those things is stay calm, be courteous, just as you do with anyone. If a person comes in with that, just make sure that you're calm and you're able to engage and it stops being a stressful situation. Take a breath and move forward. Limiting the conversations So what we want to do is we always want to make sure that we're limiting the conversations and do not answer any questions regarding someone's presence. So in this, we have to understand that our role is not to protect, and it is not to limit the ability of those people coming in. All right. So we have to make sure that we're not identifying these people are here and we're not telling them that ICE is there for them. Okay. So making sure that we do that. So the first step that we have to do is we have to ask for a warrant. So, and I'll walk through a bunch of different scenarios that we're going to have. But the thing is to be able to come into your location and be able to see if there's a family member or a person that they want in the side of the back of your private areas, we have to make sure that they have a warrant to be able to get in there. If you have legal representation in any way, that warrant should be reviewed by them. All right. And you are authorized to say, I would like this to be viewed by my legal representation. And what I would like you to do is to stay in a certain location that is secure. All right. So you're going to ask them to wait in an area that is secure, but it's outside of any sort of private spaces that you have within inside of your clinics. All right. And then what do it, you're going to inform them that you're going to get back to them. They have to understand what that timeline is, and they're going to want to understand what that timeline is. So just identifying that to them is going to be important. Sorry if I have to go off papers. I can't read the board there. So, okay. So what type of warrant are you going to be looking for? Now, there's a lot of different types of warrants they might come at you with, all right? One of them is an ICE warrant. If they come with an ICE warrant does not get them back into one of your private areas, all right? It does not get them back there. That's one that patrol officer has filled out in his car and then he brought into your location. That is not authorized to enter any of the private areas that we identify within inside of our clinics or locations. So what you're going to want to see is a judicial warrant. That warrant is one that is signed by a judge. And it is going to have some specific things assigned to it. So you're going to see those within inside of it. It's going to have the specific address to be searched. It will have your location. It will have your suite, and it will identify that they can go back into that back area where their patients are potentially being seen. It's going to identify that. If it does not identify that, they cannot go back into that private space right there, okay? The time that the search must be taken, there's a time period that they're authorized to have, All right. So oftentimes it is more along the lines of a day. It's a time period, maybe office hours, those kinds of things. That's what it's going to be identified inside of there. It's going to have a detailed description of the person and all the information for that person. So it's going to describe them, but then it's also going to have their names, any numbers that are associated with them. It's going to have that for you. And then it's issued by the court, signed by a judge or magistrate. And there must be some sort of probable cause statement to why they're actually going in to get this individual or individuals. Okay, so make sure that when they come in, that the first things you ask for is you ask for their name, badge number, but then do you have a judicial warrant? Actually say judicial warrant, because if they say we have a warrant, they're going to put something out in front of you that may look like a warrant. It may end up causing confusion in the process. Ask for that judicial warrant. So without a judicial warrant or procedure, ICE agents cannot compel you to answer questions or provide identification. If they come in and they say, I need to find this individual, they give the name of that individual. Are they in your facility today? You are not compelled to have to answer that, all right? The judicial warrant would provide them the ability to go look for them, but it's not your responsibility to tell them if they're there or not. It's not your responsibility to tell them that they're sitting behind them in the waiting room, all right? It's not your responsibility to do that, okay? So make sure to take care of yourself in that situation, and you're protecting yourself when it comes to identifying that individual to them. But so if there's any questions that you're not comfortable answering, you do have the right to remain silent in that situation, specifically if there is not a judicial warrant. And then if there's any situation where those individuals end up becoming aggressive in any way, please do contact security if you have that on site or in an area that you're in, or contact local law enforcement. Local law enforcement can help sort through those. They can also help you understand the aspect of what that judicial warrant's looking like. If you don't have the ability or you're confused by the process, always identifying or bringing in local law enforcement to assist will also help. They're different agencies, and so they're going to operate, which I expect them to operate, impartially, and they're supposed to assist you because you're that complainant asking for assistance, okay? So know if you need any of those kind of things, you can always reach out to those other agencies. Okay, so untruthful responses to ICE agents. As I said, you don't have to say anything, all right? So if there's no judicial warrant, they're not authorized to be there, contact law enforcement. Law enforcement should escort them out. You don't have to say anything. But to actually say untruthful things, as in they've asked for this person's not here, and that person is in the back, okay? Those type of things are those untruthful statements, and they are prohibited by law for actually hiding, sheltering, or assisting unauthorized individuals from evading detection, all right? Not saying anything is not hiding them, all right? So understand that. You saying, no, they left 10 minutes ago and they're headed to this location to send them in a different direction, that's hiding, that's sheltering, that is assisting. So know that if saying nothing is going to be the best situation in that scenario, whether there's a warrant or there's not. Okay? Providing false information or documentation to an ICE can have illegal consequences. As you would imagine, if you're committing a crime, that is actually you could be prosecuted for that. And you should know concealing, harboring, or shielding any unauthorized individuals from that detection is going to lead towards some criminal actions, probably against you or your office in some way, or your organization. So what if now we're getting into that what if kind of thing that happens. Oftentimes we're seeing that kind of stuff on social media and, the fear things that are being put out there potentially to our organization. What if they say, no, we're going to go back to those locations. I'm going to go back into that area. I'm going to force my way in. I'm going to encompass your facility and wait for anybody to walk out. I'm going to try to enter through your back door or any of those kind of things. What you need to do is you need to inform them that they are not authorized into non-public areas. Those are all the areas that you've identified either by a locked door or a sign that says this is a private area. The private area is typically where you're seeing the patients themselves, okay? Waiting rooms, not necessarily are private areas, but also if you identify it as only people that are coming in for services within inside of your organization or your clinic, those things right there also make that potentially a private area where the individuals would have to wait outside. We have a few clinics where you actually have to get buzzed into the waiting room itself. At that point, that waiting room right there is also considered a private area. Once they come in, they give their judicial warrant, they would actually have to leave that private area at that point, okay? So if they end up trying to enter, the first action is you tell them they cannot come in. If they enter without permission, restate that. Did I write reinstate? Sorry, I apologize. I just read reinstate too. So it's restate that they are not authorized into that area. And then do not attempt to physically block anyone, okay? Again, it is not our place to get in front of anyone to where we potentially could have harm done to us, all right? You state, I don't want you going back there. You restate, I don't want you going back there. In that time, now you call 911 because these people are illegally entering your facility. They do not have a judicial warrant, or you have not given them permission based off of that judicial warrant after your legal review or your review of the document itself. Do not permit visitors to intervene. There's a lot of people that have concerns with this issue. And what they're going to do is while they're in their waiting room, they may give their opinion on an ICE agent. They may try to engage them. What you want to try to do is get those individuals to make sure that they're not communicating with them. The people in your waiting room, please try to see if you can also de-escalate them if they try to end up engaging with the ICE agents. We wouldn't want some sort of thing happening to our families that could potentially cause them harm or get them arrested for impeding anything also. And then you need to contact security and law enforcement. Again, security and law enforcement can assist you, and then they will get in the way of those individuals coming in or doing what they need to do. If it is an illegal arrest, I would hope that our local law enforcement could assist and make sure that those actions cannot be taken. Okay, so now I'm going to run through. This is a script, right? This is a script. This is a script we actually give our welcome desks to utilize, all right? So this is what they actually do if an ICE agent comes to the hospital, comes to one of our clinics, our welcome desks and our security staffs are given this script to hear. It's, officer, I'm required to see your identification. Would you show me your ID? The ID is going to come with, it's almost like an ID card. It's a larger ID card. It has the ICE information on it. It will also have a badge that's attached to it, and you'll be able to see that. On the badge and on that ID number is the ICE agent's badge number, all right? So you take that identification number down, and you take the person's name, and that way you can identify it to any either legal counsel or other law enforcement that is doing that check on the judicial warrant for you. Officer, do you have a judicial warrant or subpoena? Officer, can you wait in the common area or outside while we review the document? Due to HIPAA, EMTALA, and organizational policy, ICE or other law enforcement may not enter patient care non-public areas until their documentation has been reviewed. And then finally, I will get back to you as soon as possible. Can I document your name and badge number? And that's where you'll make sure you take it down and you provide all of that either for a legal review, or you can contact the court that judicial order is coming from. So like you don't have a lawyer, you're a small practice and you want to check this out, you can contact the court, all right, and be able to identify it that way. Most likely the court will be open the same hours that you are. Okay, so make sure to get that validated and that is a valid judicial warrant. ICE agents understand this. ICE agents that are going to work with you and are doing the proper thing are going to give you the time to do that. And as I mentioned, they can wait in the waiting room, or they could wait outside, or you could find them a location where they can wait that ends up keeping their privacy, but then also the privacy of your other patients. Okay, remember, they cannot enter the private space. So, and this is my final slide on this one, and I want to go to questions after this before I start into the domestic violence piece. But so the things you need to remember, you should always document the agent's name and badge number. You should always ask for a judicial warrant. You should be polite and professional with everyone, right? You're going to be that way anyways. That's the nature. We're not taking sides here, all right? We're just trying to give the best care to our patients and families, all right? But we also want to make sure that we're good with our legal responsibilities when it comes to how we operate and where we operate. And then you should never physically intervene or permit a visitor to do so. So the aspect of going to that patient or family member that is in the back area and informing them that ICE is outside, we should not do that, okay? You do not identify that. You also don't change the care that you're providing. So if that individual is done with the care, then they're permitted to leave. You can't, though, show them to the back door, okay? They still would leave out the normal way that they would leave from your facility and the way that they've left in the past. Now, if it is your procedure for them to leave out the back door and you permit them to do that, then fine. But if that is not a common procedure, do not aid the aspect of avoiding the ICE agents, okay? Providing false information, again, don't tell them they've gone somewhere else or they're not there, or because if they do later find out that they actually were there could be some criminal prosecution. And then enter into a verbal altercation. To actually sit and fight and debate over the activity is not worth your time, all right? If there's no judicial warrant, contact law enforcement. All right. If they're trying to go back into your spaces and you've told them no, contact law enforcement. If there's a judicial warrant and you have their badge number and they're authorized, you've contacted the people who issued the warrant and they've validated it, the ICE agents are permitted to go back into that private space. That private space is identified in the judicial warrant. Again, if it doesn't identify the private space in the judicial warrant, they're not permitted back there either way. Okay. Is there any questions? This is a tough topic, and it's sensitive, and I understand, but definitely would like to take some questions if there is, because it's concerning for all. Yeah.
In these scenarios, are the ICE agents specifically looking for an individual? Like, is that part of the judicial warrant? They
Yes.
have like a list of individuals that they're looking for.
Correct. So the judicial warrant has to have the person's name. They'll most likely, if there's some sort of numbers, maybe there's some numbers from a processing that they had come through before. They'll have their name. They'll have a physical description. And it will have the location of where they're actually looking for them in. If you see here on the judicial warrant, it says that judicial warrant says Tom Jones we're looking for him. Tom Jones, 6 foot tall, 180 pound man, blah, blah, blah. Go into details on the person. And then it says 24 Elm Street. All right. But your office is on 36 Court Street. The judicial warrant doesn't apply to you. So they need to go to 24 Elm Street and find that individual. Okay? So those are the kind of things where it's going to be that descriptive and should be that descriptive. And then if it's not, you contact if it is or it isn't, you should contact the person that provided that and ask them, is there additional description that should be part of this, because what I'm reading here does not authorize these agents back into the area. Again, if you have legal counsel to be able to review that, they probably could do it better and make sure that to cover all the bases with it. Yep.
With regard to the legal counsel, I mean, I don't know if you actually know the answer to this, but does our liability insurance, I mean, they have lawyers we can get in touch with immediately. Could that be our legal counsel?
So I don't know about your liability insurance, but what I would do is after this, I would contact them and see if they have lawyers that could assist you in reviewing subpoenas or warrants in any way. And then I would reach out to them and ask that question.
Because I'm pretty sure they said they do review subpoenas, so I was thinking that.
Oh, then it's the same
good
thing.
first step.
This is that same thing. Yeah. So,
Okay. All right, great. Thank you.
And then that's the same with our office. Like if a subpoena comes to the actual welcome desk, we'll have people trying to serve subpoenas inside of our organization. We don't let them go into the organization. They have to later meet with lawyers and provide that to our legal counsel. Okay. Here we go.
For those of us that are in practices where, I mean, there is no security, there's no one besides law enforcement to call, would it be unreasonable to have them step into a private area that may be in your office while you continue to practice routine care, which is what we would do if there was a disruptive parent or somebody that had a question? We would probably escort them into a room so they're not sitting and waiting in our waiting room.
The only thing I would fear going into any private space at all, they could later come back. And if you refer it to as a private space, if your office is not in the back area where everything is, like it's out in the waiting room area and there's a door that's open to that, and that door is normally open, not technically considered a private space. Another thing that would concern me too is any documents you had within inside of that private space that is in plain sight could also be something they could see and then later use. So anything that is in plain sight, they could still use. They cannot fish through your things, but they technically, if it was a roster of who's scheduled for appointments that day, they could see that roster and it could be identified. So that would be the only fear. Honestly, having them wait outside in that situation, if it is a smaller practice and it's just as you come in, there's the waiting room. Sir, ma'am, if you could wait outside, I'm concerned that our children and family members are upset because you're here. Could you wait outside instead of waiting inside? And I will get back to you as soon as possible. Yeah. I know you don't want them sitting out in the cold, but they have jackets. Okay, right here, ma'am. Okay.
Does this only apply to federal agents, or does it also apply if local law enforcement came?
So local law enforcement, this is the exact same procedure for local law enforcement subpoenas, right? So we actually took the procedure from subpoenas, and it's the same thing. So again, if you get a subpoena, so you have a person that has a warrant for their arrest, or a person that is being served. Those things come to your location. You don't allow the back area to go hand the document to somebody, right? So what you would do is you would say that I can't confirm or deny that person is here, but I want to review the document here first, and then at that point, if it says that they can come back, which a subpoena typically isn't going to say that, or a person serving somebody, it's not going to say that. But if those show up at your location, then yes, you would try to get that legal review or contact the office that is writing the document.
When it specifies the location, would it just say like all areas of office, or would it have to say like patient rooms, offices, private offices? Like how specific does it have to be?
So it's gonna say your location. It's gonna say your location, the address on there. That will be the minimum that it says, because they may not know that there's a back area or something like that. That's where that legal review comes in, or you actually contacting and talking to the judge that signed it, that says, oh, I inferred that it was this, this, and this. Well, can you provide me a letter that says that? And that's when they would send an amendment along with it that identifies potentially the back area. I would always make sure that it says any private spaces within inside of that address too. I wouldn't let it just say the address itself. Mm-hmm. Because there's a distinct features about our locations oftentimes. And if there isn't, if you don't have a door barrier or anything like that, I would recommend that there's some sort of sign in your organization that or at your location that has, this is a private space. So.
I had one question. It's not related to coming to your office, but is about a patient that I have that has 2 autistic kids, and she discontinued their therapy, ABA therapy, which they really need because her lawyer, her attorney told her that that would increase her risk of getting caught by ICE.
Okay.
And all she can do now is just put them in front of TV, which is not helping them.
Yeah. So this,
do you know by any chance that
I know what you're talking about. The patients fearing coming for care. We've had that happening at our hospital where we've seen a reduction in numbers of individuals coming for care because there is the fear of coming, first of all, into Washington, D.C. If you're driving into Washington, D.C., there was a point where the people thought they were going to get stopped and searched just based off of driving down the road, right? So there was concern with that. Coming into the hospital, we do have concerns of that also. We can help dispel that aspect because honestly, we have not seen inside of Washington, D.C., we have not seen ICE agents inside of the hospitals. You can also say that at our location, we have not seen ICE agents or any of the facilities, we have not seen that. So you can help comfort. But if the person is determined to where they do not want to come, based off of a fear, I don't think we can compel them. Another area that is very concerning to me too is emergency care. And so an individual gets brought onto we had one, I don't want me to give cases, but an example of what you would have is we had a patient that was, that had to be brought in by EMS. And because of their parents' fear of going with or participating in it, the father actually did not come because of that fear. So I know it is a real fear that a lot of individuals have, and it's a real fear that they could be perfectly legal, but they just maybe look different or look like what is identified as somebody that may be illegal. So, any other questions, comments? This is a tough topic, so I think it's one important that we answer all the questions, though. So those are sometimes touchy things. If there is not normally recording going on in your location, I am going to give you I don't recommend it. So if there's not normally recording going on in your waiting rooms, as if you don't have cameras and that actually have audio and all that kind of stuff, I would not recommend it. If you ask them, do you mind if I'm uncomfortable with this event? Do you mind if I record our conversation? I think that would be the most effective way of being able to do that. And if they're on the up and up, they shouldn't have any issues with it being recorded. I also just always do fear recording later being used against us too. So, yeah.
What about patients in the waiting room who turn on their cell phones and record while this is transpiring?
So if recording is not permitted in your location to start, I would ask them to put their phone away or leave the facility. All right. So that's what we do at ours. We do not permit people to record. And it's just also based off of privacy inside of our locations. If you're recording, you're also getting everybody else in the waiting room. That's against our HIPAA rules. And so just running off of those same rules will be important. The other piece in there is you do not want other visitors interfering with the operation itself. So just saying words, recording, doing things that is going to escalate the situation is not valued. All right. So make sure that we get those kind of things. We ask them to either stop or they could leave our location. So any other questions? Oh, one over here.
Hi. You mentioned that there have not been any reports of ICE agents in hospitals, which is obviously reassuring. But I guess my question is, if an agent were to appropriately go through these legal steps, as far as patient safety, like in a practice, like how would they know to identify a patient was there, like because of HIPAA and appointments, or even if they were in the emergency room, like this would all take time. So I guess what is the actual,
So we've seen where, and we've talked through that. We're like, how are they going to find out they're here? They don't have access to our registration. They don't have access to our appointment lines. They don't have access to any of those things. These often will come from tips by other individuals to them, identifying that they're at this location, they're going to potentially be at the hospital itself. To me, yes, we have not seen them in our hospitals, right? At children's. I'm not going to say in Washington, D.C. We have not seen them at any children's facility that we have. But most likely they're going to know that they're there if they do, based off of a tip from somebody else. Somebody else will have told them that they have an appointment at this time, and you'll be able to find them there. So, yeah, they don't have access to appointments and things like that. They shouldn't. So, okay.
Can they come to your office by tracking the patient's phone numbers?
I don't know. I don't believe that they're tracking. So the other issue is that if they're going to track by a phone number and they're going to follow them there, there's going to be time to get that judicial warrant. If I was an ICE agent, which I'm definitely not, if I was an ICE agent, going to the hospital, tracking them to the hospital and then wanting to get them there is not where I would pick them up. I would want to get them in an open space that is public land that I can take them at that point. In the hospital, I'm going to cause all the cell phones to come out. I'm going to be on the nightly news, and it's going to be an issue. So if they are tracking them, which I don't know if they are, by cell phones and things like that, I would definitely not do it in a place where I later had to get the judicial warrant, which is going to take them a few hours to get them if I can get them on the road. So yeah, not probable. Okay, any other questions? Okay, one more. Okay, yeah. So she asked the question of what's the difference between a judicial warrant and an ICE warrant. So an ICE warrant is not valid. It's an ICE agent that is filling out a form in their car that's, I can pick this individual up and bring them in, right? And that is what they're filling out before they're picking somebody up off the road or out in the parking lot at Home Depot or in a facility or a work area or a construction site or one of those kind of things, which we're seeing often, right? That's an ICE warrant. That means I'm going to go do this, but it's an open space, right? But it has warrant written on it. I don't like that. I don't think it's a good thing to do, but they have them. If it comes in and it's an ICE warrant, not a judicial warrant, it is not going to have a judge's signature on it. It's not going to have the great descriptions that you see in your location with the potential, going into private areas. It's not going to have that on it. It's only going to it's going to be a very quick, almost single piece of paper that just is handwritten, and it will say that they're going to pick them up. That's what that is. Okay. One more, and then we'll go into our next area. I said I was going to let everybody ask questions.
If they were to successfully take the parent, would they leave the minor at the practice? And should we contact just local authority to find other family members for the minor?
So it should be their responsibility to have somebody available who is already doing that. So the ICE agent would typically come with somebody that would be able to handle the child, or if they weren't going to do that. Either if they don't, they're going to bring everybody with them. All right. So if it is where there's maybe CPS is involved or something else, they would bring them with them. If they're not, I would recommend that you advise them that is an action that they should take. If they don't take that, contact the local law enforcement and our own child protection so that we can make sure that we take care of that child. Okay. Okay. So how many people have been involved with domestic events inside of your hospital or your clinics or your locations and things like that? Again, we have trying times, right? There's times when there's patients and families that are under a lot of stress. Those families also are under a lot of stress inside of their own personal lives. There's a lot of things going on and we do not know what it is. What should be our priorities when it comes to if there's any type of domestic violence event? Now, what I'm talking about here is what are our security steps? How do we keep our staff safe? How do we make sure that our patients and families stay safe in this opportunity also? So the domestic event happens. What should be our first actions? Well, a domestic event happens. We should make sure that we call assistance in this. Right? So if a domestic event is happening, it's shouting, screaming, any of those kind of things, there's the aspect of de-escalation, trying to de-escalate that event. If there's any sort of physical contact, physical harm, any of those kind of things, that's where 911 should be called. That is a law enforcement issue. Okay, so please, first action, almost like if we're, I was taught in the 5th grade. Actually, I had a funny story I was going to give you guys, but I'm not going to give it because we're running a little late. So when I was in the 5th grade, taught CPR, first action was contact 911, right? A physical assault, domestic event, contact 911 on that. Push a panic button. Ask for assistance. Also, try to bring in somebody else with you. So if you're alone in that situation and you see that assault happen, whether it is on a child or whether it is on another parent, bring in someone else. Call for someone else. Be loud. Okay? Make sure that you can get that assistance. There's no problem with being loud. Alerting is also important. Now, we identify alert discreetly. That's where you don't say, I'm calling 911 to them, but it is an identified, we are contacting law enforcement. Okay? Remove the child from the danger itself. Now, I've had scenarios where we had parents assaulting one another and they were holding a baby. How many have we seen in this kind of situation? Well, what's going to happen to that baby when the other parent has to defend themselves? All right. I've seen it where they just take hits. All right. I've seen it where the child ends up getting slung and they're hanging by the parent, or they could potentially be dropped. So our first thing in that, we've contacted 911, then protect the patient. All right. So that's our first 2 responsibilities. All right. So make sure that they end up being able to be safe. Move the child to a non-threatening either caregiver, so identify someone that's not part of it, or if the other caregiver is being loud and is potentially going to assault, move them to the other caregiver or to a safe space. And then lock doors if possible for the person that is part of that confrontation. Okay? Oh, did I not move it? Sorry, my bad. Yeah. Okay, again, the security world is relatively simple, right? So that first action that you have in a domestic event is to maintain be calm, all right? Avoid arguing or making statements that escalate the aggressor. All right? So now you're by yourself, or you're in a situation where 911 has not come yet. You still have to de-escalate. You do not want to be in a situation where you're telling them you are wrong, you are a bad person, and now they see you as a potential target. So what you want to do is make sure that you empathize, all right? You do not do anything to say, oh, you were right. I'm acknowledging what you've done and what you're doing, what you've done, you're justified in that action. It is a calming method you need to put into place that says, I understand you're under a lot of stress. Let's bring down the tone. There was an example of a parent. Sorry, wow, I got real loud there for a second. There was an example of a parent that I had to deal with when I was up by the cafeteria, right? And there was a parent that was being aggressive with their child and another parent. And so what I did is when I had to do it, because security hadn't responded yet, and I'm security, but I don't have the things that our security professionals have on their duty belt and all that kind of thing. But so I had to de-escalate that situation. in that situation, the parent was being loud because there was an issue going on with the domestic, but then also other staff members were intervening and actually just agitating it a little bit. They were telling him to shut up, be quiet, that kind of thing, right? That's not what they want to hear. That's going to escalate that situation. So in mine, I just started talking to him in a calm tone. I asked him if he would come just talk to me, and I can help him with what he needs. And then I realized that when he was in the cafeteria, he was only staying there and he wasn't going to a safe place or out of the area because he was waiting on food for his children. And he wasn't going to leave till that happened, but he was going to act out in his domestic event while it was happening. So with that, I told him that I would get everything for him. I would take care of it for him. I just needed him to de-escalate and come down, and we could talk about this civilly, and then get him to a safe space that made him out of the ability to be able to harm someone. Okay? So after the incident actually happens, so a domestic event happens, you should identify everything that is involved. Now, has anybody ever seen what a police blotter looks like? I don't know why you would have been looking at police blotters, right? When you write a report, it's always best to start with who, what, when, where, why. All right? Every single thing in there. You start off, everyone starts off with time, date, event, people involved. There's subject and there's victim, all right? There's multiple subjects potentially. What we want you to do is to write all of that out, because when law enforcement comes in to identify what has happened, they're going to want to see that. They may also want to see videos of the events themselves. In domestic events, you oftentimes will have also individuals that were party to the domestic event, maybe the victim, that is reconsidering actually even making a statement. All right, so you'll want to be able to provide the most accurate description of what actually happened during the event, the behaviors, and then actions that you took to make sure that you mitigated that violence. Mandatory reporting. Now, you all should be experts in the mandatory reporting piece of things, making sure that this gets reported to anyone, specifically if the child is the one that is assaulted in that situation. And then a warm handoff when it comes to connecting the caregiver, connecting caregiver to IPV advocacy resources and that. Now, IPV is intimate partner violence, and making sure that they have the resources where they can provide that to the people that were party to the domestic event itself. Okay, and giving that handoff and making sure that happens. The other piece in here is we also want to look at our staff. If you were involved in this type of event, if any type of physical harm was done to you, we also want to make sure that is also addressed, whether that is psychological harm or physical harm that has been done to you also. So making sure the staff is comfortable and will want to come back to work without the fear of this type of event happening in the future. So, and then safety planning for future events. So this is actually the thing that takes the most time. All right, so you're going to look back on events that have happened. Now, two parents that have gotten into fights, or parents that have caused harm inside of your organization, and identify that there was potential harm maybe coming in the future based off of that. If there's a fear by your organization that this person has made threats, or there's any threats that are part to that, you need to make sure that you are working with that family and understanding whether they're permitted to bring a certain individual or they're not. How do we include that individual in still providing the care to that patient, all right, the individual who was the aggressor? Understanding that we could potentially also use things like telehealth or other discrete follow-up options. Maybe we're talking to the two parents and working that out like a social worker does. And then providing safeguards, hotline numbers discreetly to our individuals. You'll oftentimes see in many hospitals and other locations inside of the bathrooms, because again, those are private spaces between the two parents. You'll oftentimes see where we have signage that identifies, here's a hotline for domestic events. If you're a victim of intimate partner violence, please, here's a number for you to call. If you're a victim of trafficking, if you're a victim of, what is my other one? You guys can probably help me here. The victim of tracking, if you're a victim of child abuse, those things should be identified within inside of those private spaces and can be identified there to assist for anybody that is a victim of either intimate partner violence or domestic events inside of our facilities. Okay. And what I think I'll do, how much more time do I have? 50. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. So I can probably get through the violence in pediatric healthcare. So is there any questions? I might as well just do this and we'll take a couple questions. Is there any questions when it comes to domestic violence itself and understanding it? It's a difficult event, but the steps are relatively easy. It is making sure that we provide a safe place for that individual to go. Make sure that we contact 911 if physical assault has happened. Then there's also the aspect of protecting the child and making sure that they don't become a victim any further. Okay. And then from there, making sure that that we can de-escalate the individual who is involved by separating them and then talking to them, not justifying their action, but making them feel like they're being heard. Okay. And then from there, working with law enforcement and then working with that family later to determine how best are we going to be able to provide care without this type of incident happening in our facility again. Okay. So now violence in pediatric healthcare, and I see this more than I see it in adult hospitals. And what we're seeing is in pediatric, oftentimes we're accepting workplace violence. We're just taking it, specifically coming from patients, right? There's oftentimes violence that's committed by patients because you don't want to call law enforcement on a patient that bites you. But if it was an adult patient, would it be? If it's a situation where parents are oftentimes excused for their bad behavior because they're under stress, right? Those things should not be tolerated. It should be reported. It should be identified. It should be make sure that we identify that this individual has caused workplace violence before. So we are seeing rises in this, whether that is verbal abuse, intimidation, physical assault, sexual harassment, or any other on any patients, visitors, or by any patients and visitors. We also see harassment rising in areas like in telephone communications or on social media. If you see any of those things need to be addressed immediately with law enforcement, and they'll take a report. If you don't get these things addressed by law enforcement, as in you're getting harassing phone calls at your clinic location, and we see this, I don't want to say every day, but we're seeing it at least once a month. We have a harassment at one of those locations. An individual says some horrible things, says that they're going to come down there and take care of you. All right, come down there and harm you. We need to have, if there's a security team, they need to know who this person is. Those individuals need to be barred from your location. Maybe care has to be transferred, just as we have the domestic event, to some sort of other care. All right, or some other care provider needs to be the one bringing them in for their appointments. We can't allow dangerous people into our workplaces. We've actually seen at Children's National a 60% reduction in verbal and physical violence over the last 3 years because we put weapons detection systems in. All right, because we changed the culture to say we are a place of kindness and we do not tolerate any of that behavior. And so when we do identify someone that is harmful or scary or does horrible things or makes threats on the phone or harasses on social media, those individuals are barred from our locations. All right. We've seen the weapons detection do it based off of some people, I don't want to say people that carry weapons are violent, but there's some people that will not turn over their weapon or turn their weapon in. So they don't want to come to our hospital anymore. And we're seeing them taking our hospital as a serious place. We've seen a 60% reduction. We only had 14 physical violent events in the entire hospital by visitors last year. This is over 700,000 visitors last year. All right. 3 years ago, we had 60. And so when you think of those numbers, by addressing the aspect of not allowing people to harass you and then get into your doors is how we end up curbing that physical violence from happening. So identify it early. If you have anybody with concerns of being harassed or they're being harassed over social media, negative things are said about them, but then there's words like, I hate this person, I'm going to cause harm to this person, I'm going to blow up that clinic. Those things all need to be addressed to law enforcement, and either individuals get protective orders, and then your facilities become barred to those individuals, and law enforcement is called for a trespass if they show up. Okay? So just make sure we get those documented. 81.6% of nurses surveyed in pediatric behavioral health settings, so just caveat in there is behavioral health settings, reported experiencing one incident of workplace violence in the past year. Okay, perfect. That's awesome. Sorry, I'm recognizing that. So he just told me 10 minutes because he knows I'm long-winded. So in that, we've seen when it comes to our behavioral health patients, we've seen that rise. In this past year, and I'd like to, if anybody wants to reach out to us if they work in a behavioral health area, if they have concerns with that, we've actually dropped our numbers in half. So 54% of harm done to staff members has dropped by 54% this past year. We had over 240 events by patients on staff in our behavioral health areas in 2004. 2005, FY 2005, we actually only had 120. And those are the actual violent events. So we've actually saw that over 50% reduction. Highest rates occur in emergency departments, pediatric inpatient units, and pediatric psych units. So forms of violence. So all the different forms of violence that you can have, verbal abuse often turns into physical violence. So if you can de-escalate the situation and make sure that de-escalation for the verbal violence, you can end up reducing the amount of physical violence that you have. There's a direct correlation between the two. It may start off as a verbal violent event, but that verbal violent event doesn't have to turn physical. So. Threats are common. Remember, if a person has made a threat, done something like, I'm going to blow the place up, I'm going to bring a gun, I'm going to do these kind of things, they can be barred from your locations, and law enforcement needs to be addressed in that. If they're specifically saying it towards a person, you can get a protective order against those individuals. So please utilize your law enforcement resources. Perpetrators include, most are actually within inside of Children's Hospital. Most events actually happen from patients, and then any other family members or caregivers. We also sometimes do see staff-on-staff violence that happens also. Contributing factors, patient-related, mental health diagnoses, developmental disorders, emotional dysregulation, family-related, domestic events are actually the most events where visitors end up assaulting staff. It's where the staff tries to get between them during those domestic events that ends up leading to that assault. And then some of the problems that we can have in our organizations is oftentimes we're not staffed enough. You may be alone inside of your organization, inside a room with the visitors and the patients. That aspect of being alone oftentimes can be the thing that it leads to that violence. One thing that we do see is if you do anything in pairs or groups or have multiple people around, typically that physical violence is not going to happen because a person does not have that courage to take on two people. Okay, so if it is a dangerous person that you know, but you have to work with, make sure that you bring in an extra person into the room with you. It will help because oftentimes a person does not want to get physically violent with two people because they're just not that courageous. Domestic, okay, and let's see, staff shortages. I'm trying to get through these now. So the next topic, this is an interesting one that you're going to say, why are we talking about this? The one thing that I really want to focus on here, and I know you'll have the slides, so we'll be able to walk you through what a risk assessment looks like. Every one of your facilities should be looked at with a risk assessment. It should be identified with the physical security features or physical features that would lend to keeping yourself safe. That is where doors, panic alarms, cameras, other things, the integration of that. Or if you're a smaller facility, you don't have any of those things, desk shapes, desk sizes, hard doors versus soft doors. All of those things can come into play when it comes to being a safe and secure place. That creating an environment of security. And then, so you'd identify any hazards that you'd have first. What is your biggest problem? And then what I want you to do is you would identify all of the areas where you think you have risk and how do you put that precaution in place? Whether you need a procedure or whether it is some sort of physical device you can put into place to make sure that you stay secure. At our location, we have, again, I told you we have weapons detection, we have 3,000 cameras, we have 1,200 card readers, we have 1,200 panic alarms. We actually have, and I'm normally wearing my badge, we actually have devices, or personal devices that you can utilize, that it's a personal panic alarm that goes to our security operations center. Once you push that button, it will actually track you where you go to where you ran to from that potential escalation that has happened to you. You can also push that panic button while you're de-escalating the situation, and then security will come behind you. All right, so they'll show up to your location. These are all these technologies that are out there that could potentially be utilized. Now, I think this is my final thing. Kinda. Okay, so de-escalation techniques. Now, I'm just going to put these up here. Normally, I have a great social worker that comes and talks with me. It's a Brenda Shepard-Vernon, and she's great at going through the de-escalation techniques. But in here, again, de-escalation is oftentimes common sense. Every single thing in security is outrageously common. The only thing is it's a scary time to do it. So oftentimes our minds don't think of the thing to do that is relatively simple. Okay, so in these, be empathetic and non-judgmental. Respect a person's space. Don't get up on somebody when they're thinking you're being aggressive. You're being aggressive. You're the animal showing his teeth. You don't want to do that. And then allow time for decisions. Let the person speak. Don't interrupt. Listen to what they're actually saying. And then you'll find out what that problem was. Remember I mentioned to the person in the cafeteria? He kept on saying he just wanted to get his pizza. But everybody was like, you need to calm down. I just want to get my pizza. Okay, so let's get you your pizza, right? And then the situation de-escalates. You have to listen before you actually start talking. And then set limits, focus on feelings. And set limits is one of the harder things to do. You have to set that limit that says you are not going to do this in this space. But how do you say that in an empathetic way? A lot of the kids in this area are scared. And can we keep the tone down just based off of that? I was like, if you want to talk, we can go up. We and my friends here can go out and we could talk about it in a different space. That's that de-escalating the event by setting that standard that says you're not going to do it here. Okay. And then focus on feelings, ignoring challenging questions, and avoid overreacting. Okay. And then finally, these are some of those resources that I was talking about. Design through physical environment. That was that piece that I was telling you. Everyone in here can look at your space and make it a more secure location. And you can do that with multiple different things based off of the physical design of your location. If you want, you could reach out to us and we'll assist with that if you need it. All right. We've gone out to multiple different other locations and helped them look at their facilities. So again, reach out to me and we can just talk about it if you want. All right. So just know you have that resource to you. Cameras, badge read. These are all things that cost money. Staffing is important. Making sure you always have the proper staffing out there, whether you have the ability to have a security staff or not. And then local emergency response. Have those numbers handy. So bomb threat checklist. I know it's not nice to have next to a phone, but that's a great thing to have next to a phone. Also, all the emergency contact numbers that you need to provide. Another great listing that you could have down next to your phone and readily available. Have to utilize it. And then always 911 is a very easy number. If it's a non-emergency call, it's typically 311. So look in your local jurisdictions for those different types of numbers. And then training, de-escalation and emergency response training. All of those things are still very important. What you want to do is break it down as simple as possible. Make it as simple as possible. Security is a simple thing. Just break it down into little tasks, just as I broke down the ICE procedures with you. Okay. Is there any questions? Yeah. We can probably take a So you'll be sorry you're coming down there is a threat to your life. All right. So take it as that. I would report that to law enforcement. And then potentially look at other ways that you can provide care to that. That's a threat to your life right there. And I know oftentimes people use phrases and things like that, and maybe they're not as well spoken as others, but you should never take your thought of their education or their way that they speak or them just, oh, they're just escalated in the moment. That could lead to violence. And what I would say is you have to get it documented. And then if you have to tell them you're not allowed in our facility anymore, if they come in, then law enforcement is immediately called. So, and that is considered a trespass. You'd end up providing them with a letter that identifies that too. Okay. Yep. Okay.
So I have an alarm question. So
Yeah.
I have an office in Rockville.
Yeah.
We have an alarm system, but not a panic button silent alarm.
Yeah.
So if an employee is ever in a situation where they feel very threatened, would it be okay for them to hit the alarm button that sounds the alarm in the office, or does that just escalate it in a really bad way quickly?
Okay. So I don't like things like fire alarms. So or something that's going to whoop whoop whoop. It's going to set that off. That definitely does escalate a situation. What I would do is that should be a 911 call. All alarms should be discreet. Your alarm system should have a button on it that is a discrete alarm. Most do. Look for that. See if it's there. Again, I said you can reach out to me. We could actually talk about what the system is if you'd like. You could show me what it is, and I'll try if I can find the features for you. That would be the silent alarm that goes to law enforcement. We could also talk to you about potentially panic alarms that could be used. You put them under desks inside of the care areas, and you do that. So
okay, I'll talk to my alarm guy. Another question is, so we have I gave my employees pepper spray. So if they want to have it to walk to their car or anything, is that a bad idea to have at the front desk? They've never used it. We've never had a situation come close to it. But if you're actually under physical duress, is that better than nothing?
So pepper spray is scary in the medical environment. And the reason for that is because of respiratory issues that potentially could happen, it getting up into the ventilation system. The use of pepper spray, so if I was to use pepper spray in here, and I was to spray it at this individual right here, this whole table and that whole table will be affected almost immediately. And there'll be minor effects, but it will be immediately. It would then get brought up into the ventilation system, and everybody would smell it in the organization and probably have just little itchy eyes and things like that. There is things like pepper gel, which is utilized by our security team, and it comes out as a gel liquid. And that you can fire straight. It doesn't have respiratory issues. So if you want to use a pepper spray in your organization, I would recommend using something like that. Yeah. That's what we use at Children's. We have pepper gel. We've actually never deployed it though. Any questions? Any others? There's other devices you can use too. Oftentimes, things that frighten people work too. So even if you have staff that fear commuting or doing those kind of things, I always find one of the most effective systems is a whistle. There's the expensive ones that you can buy, and then there's ones that are cheaper. If you think of what a referee uses, it's called a Foxfire 40, and it's bright red or orange. That works, and you just do that repeatedly, and people will go away. So, okay, that's.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Paul. Please join me in thanking Paul Quigley. Hopefully these are never events for your practice, or maybe once in a blue moon, but I would offer to think about it like a code, that readiness for a medical emergency. You've talked about it with your staff. You've practiced something so that in those moments when we all can freeze, if you've done it once or twice or 3 times, those skills are going to come back to you just like they do in a medical emergency. I also want to offer, this was a really heavy topic for the first topic of the morning. And this may be bringing things up for people in the audience that you've experienced personally, that you've experienced in your practice. So before we do a mental mind shift, I'm just going to create a one little moment to take a big deep breath in and a big breath out, because our minds are going to go in a very different direction. So another breath in and a breath out. Okay.